Hello and welcome to The Nation. It's a pleasure to have you with me on yet another edition. I'm JESSY CHAHAL. Today we look into COP29. It's wrapped up with significant commitments from countries around the globe aiming to step up the fight against climate change. Yet, while the conference is a milestone for international cooperation, the question is, what does it look like through the eyes of a Malaysian subject matter? And how realistic are these promises? What can we truly expect moving forward? Today, we're joined by Professor Tan Sri Dr. JEMILAH Mahmood, who has followed these developments closely. She will share with us her unique perspective on the major takeaways from COP29, whether we're viewing these outcomes too optimistically and what practical lessons can be learned. So welcome to the program, Prof. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Jess. Great to be back here.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I know you've had your keen eye as well as been present at the COP29 virtually. And, you know, for starters, what's your opinion or your view on COP29 and some of the key highlights that really stood out for you?
Thank you. I've been following COPs for many years, and for me, particularly in our center at the Sunway University, the climate crisis is a health crisis. And this is something that we have been consistently putting on the table. In terms of COP29 per se, COP29 was always flaunted to be a finance COP. This is the ambition of the government of Azerbaijan as a host to deliver on the promise of climate financing. So I'm trying to be a little bit of a pragmatic, half glass full person here, although deep down inside the activist in me is saying, my God, what a failure. The agreement on funding finally was somewhat positive. The bill that was put forward by the developing world, who are very severely impacted by climate change, is a sum of $1.3 trillion per year. In the closing moments of COP29, the number that was arrived at, the figure was 300 million, which is far from 1.3 trillion. So in many ways, that's a disappointment. But 300 million, I guess, is better than no millions. So we have a starting point for that. But really, we need to keep the pressure up, because that amount of 1.3 trillion is probably an underestimate on the impact of climate change on the developing world, who are not responsible for the emissions globally. So the other thing I think that has become clear to me, at least in terms of success, it is that we now know that the fight that is coming to us, right? What are the dimensions of the fight to come? And I think that is about looking at finance again. Let me give you a couple of very compelling figures. If you look at the cost of war, the spend on war is about US 2.5 trillion. For people to actually spend that money for humanity to go against humanity, and not willing to look for that 1.3 trillion or put aside that 1.3 trillion to defend us all as humanity and as people against this real threat of climate crisis.
So obviously you've come away from that recognizing that there is a gap.
There's a huge gap
in the amount that has been pledged. Developed nations are pledging 300 billion annually by the year 2035. What is adequate, or what has been requested, is 1.3 trillion. So of course a big gap there. How realistic or achievable are the goals of COP29, budget aside? How achievable are they, or is it just wishful thinking?
Look, COP29 is an intergovernmental process, and so will the future COPs be. It can only be as achievable as the political will to make it happen, right? But when you have, and let's talk about the elephant in the room, when you have two successive COPs in oil-producing nations, and one major oil-producing nation influencing the text, in fact, it was disclosed days before the end of COP that there was a country that particularly deleted text from the final negotiations, and that's not supposed to happen. When a draft is out for circulation, you shouldn't be deleting things. So the transparency of the whole process, this lack of progress on transitioning from fossil fuels, is going to be a major issue. So for us to be truly achievable, we need to hold member states accountable for the promises that they made in Paris. We are going to exceed 1.5, and that's terrible. Now, where is the accountability mechanism on, you know, a pledge you made in another intergovernmental process?
So if you could pinpoint into any specific aspects of COP29, which do you believe, from what was discussed, from fossil fuel to loss and damage funds to climate finance as a whole, to the NDCs, as well as energy transition initiatives, what aspects do you think can be more tangible in terms of its impact globally as well as within the region here?
I think what is clear is the energy transition is urgent, and it must happen, and it will happen, because you have countries like China very quickly pivoting into renewables, and other countries will follow suit. And it has been shown that it is possible to transition to renewable fuels, right? So that's one. The second, of course, is that I think it's really important to have that voice of activists, civil society, academics saying, look, here's the science to tell you that we are in deep trouble as humanity. And this is not about saving the planet, it's about saving us. Our health is at stake. The planet will thrive once we're all dead, right? And I think that, that energy that I've seen in the last two COPs, the quiet activism and sometimes the loud activism, is actually beginning to shift some of the conversations. We have a real battle in front of us. We have a need for us to examine how we live, how we work, how we develop our economies, and that at the end of the day, it really is about transitioning away from fossil fuels as quickly and as justly as possible.
It is about a discussion, it's about strategy, a plan, as well as an outcome. Coming away from COP29 this year, what do you think environmental advocates should take away from what was highlighted or discussed at COP29?
I think the first thing we need to take away is we can't do it alone. Right? Environmental activists, people who are concerned about health, can't do it without engaging with the other side, right? So that's super clear. But I think what we need to do better is actually making sure the developing countries, at least, the countries from the global south, have a coherent message, right? There was a walkout from one of the Pacific Island states. We're just very lucky that not all the LDCs walked out, because that would have collapsed the COP, right? But I think that clear messaging, very coherent messaging from the least developed and the developing nations and middle income countries is going to be very crucial. I still come back to the issue on health, because at the end of the day, you can talk about everything else, but if you have no health and people are going to continually be ill or die as a result of climate change, which is actually happening around the world, we need to put the focus back on people and find a way that that balance of power and that responsibility of the developed world who have created this problem, they must be held accountable and responsible. What
is ahead for the SIDS and the LDCs at this point?
Yeah, I think that I feel very sorry for small islands particularly, or rather they like to call themselves large ocean nations, because they are losing their countries one by one, right? The sea level rise is going to be a major issue in our region as well. And you're talking about people, you're talking about more than 1 billion people on the move in 2050, because they have no place to live, they have no safe place to shelter, they have no economic activity to carry out, because their homes and their nations will be in deep water or in deep trouble. So where do they turn to? And I think this is where regional institutions as well, regional intergovernmental bodies, need to now sort of wake up to say, if there are going to be people who are migrating as a result of climate change, they will come to the nearest land point that they see safety and security.
So would you say that this is one of the areas that did not get enough attention?
I think this is one of the areas that we take for granted. I think people kind of know that, yes, sea level rise is going to happen, some of the islands will, disappear, but I don't think people realize the impact of 1 billion people on the move, right? And I fear, the xenophobia that can be stoked and everything else when migrants move, but not because they have a choice, but they have to do that to ensure. I think one area I particularly feel very strongly is that the non-traditional security that we talk about, right? Normally you talk about security from military point of view and so forth, but we're talking about non-traditional security, climate change, health. These are areas of climate peace and security, right? These are non-traditional areas of security. We need to take this very seriously.
Now, from that and with the outcomes, what do you think are the next steps for countries, including Malaysia? In which way should we move forward towards this commitment of promise for action?
When you look at the larger view, Malaysia is actually probably one of the better performing countries, in the sense that at least we have a government that is producing their reports on their NDCs. We are quite transparent about this. We have an end game kind of plan. We have an energy transition roadmap. We have net zero targets in some of the larger institutions. We have a health ministry that's very committed to decarbonization. So I think as far as Malaysia is concerned, we are moving in the right direction. We need to move maybe a little faster, and we need to get many more people on board. The opportunity, I feel, is that Malaysia is going to chair ASEAN in 2025. And I think the climate crisis, the planetary crisis, is not just the climate crisis, it's also biodiversity loss, it's also pollution. All these are all interconnected. And I think we have a real opportunity to lead the nation into some forward thinking on how our regional security is also very important, because, as ASEAN says, we can't prosper thy neighbor, right? You are only as successful as your neighbor. So I hope and I am confident our leadership will show the way in how we bring a much coherent ASEAN perspective. And that message of coherence from a regional perspective is important. When everyone is singing off the same song sheet, recognizing that we are not responsible for major emissions, but we are also responsible for biodiversity loss. We are also responsible for pollution, which actually triggers and also augments and amplifies the climate and planetary crisis.
So one of the key or main lock points, if you will, is the fact that there is a tension or lack of balance between economic interests and climate goals.
Yeah.
Who gets behind this, and who can be the judge of this imbalance?
And I'm going to say something that you may say, she can say that because she's not, running the country. But the fact is that we have been so reliant on GDP as our measure of success. In a planet that is ailing, you have to re-examine what really is a measure of success. If you have a high GDP, but unrest, unhappiness in the nation, people feel that their own security and their well-being is not looked after, then I don't think GDP is a great measure. And more now, nations are moving towards what we call well-being economics, right? Looking at much more regenerative, circular economies. And I think what we need to do is then re-examine ourselves as a nation. Where do we want to be? How do we take care of the people who live in our country? And what will make them live well and thrive? And it may not be, it may be counter to the GDP narrative. Mm-hmm. So we are seeing this, happening in countries like Finland, which are high economic countries, Costa Rica, which is not like us, a developing country, and more now. We need to go towards more nature-centric, values-based systems rather than return of interest. So this is where our center and our university is really spearheading some work on looking at return on values rather than return of investment, because values create, it's all in line with Madani. It's about community, it's about solidarity, it's about sustainability, it's about trust and social equity. So that's the kind of nation I would like to see Malaysia becoming, so that I don't go out and see abject poverty or unrest or unhappiness,
Yep.
you know, and that's so important.
Prof, give us an idea of the landscape, as in what are we doing as a nation and what would be that ideal goal? Paint us that picture.
Yeah, I think many people don't realize that through the Ministry of Science and Technology and Academy of Science, we have just, you know, presented to the Prime Minister and the National Science Council a National Planetary Health Action Plan. What it does is looks at systemic shifts that need to happen for us to be able to thrive as humanity while ensuring the planet is also protected and attaining the SDGs as far as possible. This is the first country to do that, and I'm incredibly proud to see this. Now, taking that plan, now turning that plan into reality, which means re-examining how we function, how governance works, how, you know, our partnerships between civil service, civil society, private sector, how we create ecosystems that actually encourage the private sector to do good business. What are the incentives? What are disincentives? How do we protect nature by, you know, looking at the governance structures between federal and state? So all these things are in the National Planetary Health Action Plan. So I think we have a real opportunity now to demonstrate that we can do it. We have a plan. Now we have to make the plan work. So that will be, you know, next year, I believe, you know, between Ministry of Science, Ministry of Economy and other ministries to work out the structure of governance that's required to ensure that the plan is successful. And I think we need to communicate with everyone in Malaysia that we have a plan, we have a good plan, we can make it work if everybody contributes, because the climate crisis, the crisis of biodiversity loss, the whole triple planetary crisis is created by us.
We need to be held accountable
We
for
need to,
it.
every one of us.
So big strides need to be made. Structurally,
Yes.
we need to have some changes as well, some realignment, if you
Absolutely.
will. What is that starting point? What would be the next best, fastest, quickest, most efficient way to get that ball rolling?
I think the plan, I think the National Planetary Health Action Plan will be that starting point. It will connect with our, you know, RMK13. It will connect with how we develop as a nation. It will require us to re-examine how we educate our children, what values we give to them. It will also push us to rethink that actually doing sustainable nature-based approaches to business is good business. You know, we want private sector to continue making profit, but you can make profit without jeopardizing the planet.
Are we on a timeline?
We are on a strict timeline. When I talk to people, I tell them 1.5 is over.
1.5 degrees Celsius in a global temperature.
Yes, it's over. We're crossing it, all right? We have to now think 3 degrees. Now, anyone listening to this show, go and Google or ask ChatGPT what will happen to us when we cross 2 degrees and when we cross 3 degrees. You will be shocked to learn that many of our coastal cities will be underwater. Many of our economic activities will have to be stopped. Many of our schools will have to be closed. Air pollution is another major issue. It's all linked to climate change and fossil fuels. Look at what's happening in India. Children can't go to school. Yeah. People are suffocating even in their own homes. Now, these are real things. But when you hit 2 degrees and 3 degrees, you tip what we call the tipping points and the cascading tipping points from the Arctic Circle in Greenland right down to our region. Everything is connected. The minute one tipping point is tipped, you get what we call a domino effect, and you get one Earth system tipping after the other. And the repercussions, the impact on human lives, human businesses, human activity is going to be very severe.
So for a 0.5 sort of retractment, we don't really have much time to lose.
We don't have much time. But if we're serious about it, we can do it. If we really rapidly, aggressively decarbonize, right? And I applaud the government for removing the subsidies, because I think that's a very important first step. There's $1.4 trillion spent on subsidies, and here we are asking for $1.3 trillion for climate finance. It's simple mathematics, right? So I think, you know, it's about effective policies. It's about educating the public that we are responsible. The way we consume, the way we, you know, we live our lives is is driving the planet to not the planet to extinction, us to extinction.
The UN Climate Change Executive Secretary Simon Still, he highlighted that the new finance goal agreed at the UN Climate Conference in Baku is an insurance policy for humanity.
Absolutely.
Give us context.
So the reason why he said that is because that is your investment to, like insurance, you put money in, you don't see the immediate effect until you actually fall sick or your house gets on fire or something,
Until you're in trouble.
Until you're in trouble. So this investment is hopefully to prevent us from needing to put out the fires, from making sure that, we don't fall really, really sick and we have to spend all that money.
But he also said that, or rather he acknowledged that no country got everything they wanted from COP29, and that the world leaves Baku with a mountain of work to do. So he says it's no time for victory laps. We need to set our sights and redouble our efforts on the road to Belém.
I think he has to also examine the COP process. UNFCCC really needs to take a seat back and really reflect on how these processes have not been as effective as they can be. I think, the whole process, as I said, the choice of country, what the criteria for you to have a COP, and the third thing is holding people accountable, right? I think this is very important. And the other thing is, COP is an intergovernmental process. That intergovernmental negotiation must not be left at the last minute. I am sick and tired personally to see that we are working through to 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., particularly in intergovernmental negotiations, when the process leading to that COP should have already lined up and ticked the box on several other things, and then leave the difficult issues to be discussed at the COP venue and take a serious, sort of time-bound, very, very well, negotiated process. So I think UNFCCC can improve.
Is there just a lot of lip syncing by world leaders on this issue?
Unfortunately, yes. Right? Particularly from the developed world. Right? And here we have the champions from the developing world. The Mia Motleys of the world. Even our minister has been very vocal on these issues. How now do we get the Global South to stand up, take responsibility now, and lead? I always say that you almost have to hospice the Global North now, and I think it's our time. And especially in an era where the geopolitics has become so difficult, where there's a possibility the US may transition out of these negotiations or have very little to do with it, where will the new world order be, right? So I think it's countries like China, like Malaysia, like Indonesia, like India, those of us who know what it's like to feel the impact of climate change, who have the solutions, but maybe we don't have as much money, but we need to start working together.
Where do you see the greatest opportunity for experts and advocates, activists like yourself, to push for more substantial climate action?
I think we just need to keep hammering at it. You have to be so persistent, right? Rome is not built in a day. But having said that, we also need to be more savvy. The fossil fuel lobby, what they're doing, the lobbying behind the scenes, the way they influence some of these decisions, we need to learn from them.
But at COP29, there was no consensus that was reached based on fossil fuel.
There was absolutely nothing. In fact, it regressed. At 28, at least there was some mention. In 29, it's gone. So this was the work of one particular country that actually reduced the text.
What are your thoughts overall as a nation as we move forward, battling COP29, or as you say, its failure in the background? Where do we go from here?
All I want to say to our world leaders is this: we have a tremendous opportunity. The leadership from this region has emerged. The Global South is getting stronger. This region is going to be an economic powerhouse. It is not just for the now, it is an intergenerational duty. We owe it to future generations. I would think at the moment, I can see many leaders who I would think on their tombstones should be written, I actually contributed to the death of future generations. I'm being very strong language here because I think it's true. And I'm not talking about only government leaders, other leaders as well, businesses and so forth. I think, when you look forward to the future generations, what we owe to them, what we're doing now that's destroying the lives of our future grandchildren, great-grandchildren, think about that for a moment, right? Why are we here on this earth? Why are we here? We are here to protect what is on Earth and for future generations. And I think we need to owe that. And as a health professional, I would say disease patterns will change. Severity of disease due to climate change will be more prominent. And I think we don't have time, but whatever time we have now, we need to do things better, more collaboratively, and faster.
And we're all stakeholders in this.
And we're all stakeholders, every single one of us, including media.
Including media. These commitments made are undoubtedly significant, but also turning them into actionable solutions will be the key challenge in the years ahead. To our viewers, the conversation doesn't just end here. Climate change is an ongoing reality that requires collective effort, innovation, and determination from all of us. So thank you for joining us right here on The Nation. Thank you, Prof, for coming in and sharing your perspective and insights as well. This has been The Nation. Stay tuned for more meaningful discussions right here on Planetary TV. See you next time. Bye-bye.